Spending weekends at Carl's place had become my routine. After a long work week, I'd pack my bag, drive over to his house, and settle in for 2 days of what I thought was a peaceful relationship. Carl was 38, older than me by almost a decade, but I liked that. He had a steady, structured life, which was a change from my past relationships. He also had a 16-year-old daughter, Emily, who lived with him on alternating weeks. At first, I wasn't sure how to navigate that dynamic, but over time, we found a balance. She wasn't difficult, and though we weren't close, she was polite, appreciative, and even asked for things in a quiet, almost hesitant way. Carl, however, wasn't as content as he made himself out to be. He had a job he hated, one that felt stagnant with no chance for growth. I could see the frustration in him whenever he talked about it, the way his voice would tighten, how he'd glance at his phone like he was counting down the days until something changed. That's why, 7 months ago, he partnered with Gabby, a 35-year-old woman who, from what I gathered, was smart, successful, and well-connected in the industry they were trying to break into. Carl had always been more of a people person than a technical expert, so his role in their business was clear. He brought in clients while she handled the operational side. I had my reservations about it, not because I suspected anything romantic, at least not then, but because it worried me how dependent he was on her. If Gabby ever decided to cut him off, what would he have left? She was the one with the skills and experience. He was just there. I mentioned it once, lightly, but Carl brushed it off. Over the months, I watched as their partnership became more consuming. Long hours, late nights, endless phone calls. I tried to be supportive, understanding that starting a business required sacrifices. But then, something changed. At first, I didn't think much of Carl's late nights. Starting a business took effort, and I wasn't the kind of girlfriend who demanded constant attention. He had dreams of leaving his dead-end job, and if that meant staying up until 2 a.m. working, so be it. But then, the excuses started piling up, meetings that ran unusually late, calls he had to take in another room, random cancellations of our Friday night plans because something urgent came up. I told myself I was being paranoid, that this was just what it looked like when someone built something from the ground up. But deep down, a nagging feeling started to creep in. The first real moment of doubt hit me on a Sunday afternoon. Weekends were supposed to be our time together, but that day, Carl casually mentioned he had to go meet Gabby. That struck me as odd. Sunday afternoons weren't exactly peak business hours, and even if they had something pressing to discuss, why couldn't it wait until Monday? Still, I said nothing. I smiled, nodded, and let him go. I even convinced myself that I was overthinking it. But when he left, something about the way his family reacted made my stomach twist. His mother, who had been visiting, sighed quietly but didn't say anything. His brother avoided looking at me. Emily, who was sitting on the couch scrolling through her phone, barely reacted at all. That moment stayed with me. The unease, the feeling that something wasn't quite right. I started paying closer attention, piecing together little things that hadn't seemed important before. The way he always seemed just a little too rushed when he left. The way his phone was always face down when we were together. The way his family, people who had once been warm and welcoming to me, started acting just a little different. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but for the first time, I wondered if I should be looking at all. 2 weekends ago, everything unraveled. It was a regular Saturday night, and I was at Carl's place like usual. His 2 brothers were over, along with his sister-in-law and his mother. Emily was there too, curled up on the couch, scrolling through her phone. It felt normal, until the knock on the door. At first, no one moved. It was strange. The energy in the room shifted, a sudden stiffness settling over everyone. Carl was in the shower, so I figured I'd just get the door myself. But before I could stand, his older brother, Jake, got up quickly. "I got it," he said, his voice a little too firm. That was weird. Why did it matter who answered the door? My confusion deepened when he cracked it open just enough to peek outside, as if he were trying to block whoever was there from seeing in. Then I heard her voice. "Where's Carl?" I had never met Gabby in person, but I recognized her tone instantly from the times I'd overheard her on the phone with Carl. Confident, direct. But now, there was something else underneath it. Anger. Jake tried to say something, but before he could, Gabby shoved past him, stepping fully into the living room. Her gaze landed on me instantly. "You're his girlfriend?" she asked, voice sharp. I blinked, caught off guard. "Excuse me?" Her eyes flicked around the room, as if she were assessing who here was on her side. "You're the one dating Carl," she repeated, slower this time, like she already knew the answer, but needed to hear it from me. Something about the way she was looking at me made my skin crawl. I felt every pair of eyes in the room shift between us. I nodded. "Yeah, I am." Gabby let out a bitter laugh and shook her head. Then, with absolute certainty, she said, "That's interesting, because Carl has been in a relationship with me." Silence blanketed the room. I felt my stomach drop, my pulse hammering in my ears. "What the hell are you talking about?" I demanded, my voice sharper than I intended. Gabby crossed her arms, her expression a mix of fury and something else. Vindication. "I've been with Carl for months. We've been together, working, building something. And now I find out he's been playing house with you." I laughed, but it was humorless, hollow. "You're lying." "I wish I was," she shot back, "but I'm not. Ask his family." I turned to them, waiting for someone, anyone, to shut this down, to tell her she was delusional, that she was making things up. But no one said a word. Not his mother, not his brothers, not Emily. That was all the confirmation I needed. Gabby scoffed, shaking her head. "Wow, so this is why you didn't want me to come in?" She snapped at Carl's brother. "You were covering for him?" Jake shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my eyes. His younger brother muttered something under his breath, rubbing his temples. Carl's mother just sighed, like this was exhausting for her, like she'd seen it before. And Emily? Emily sat there, still scrolling on her phone like none of this was happening. I felt my throat tighten. I turned back to Gabby. "If this is true, why are you here? Why now?" "Because I just found out. I saw messages. He's been lying to both of us." At that moment, Carl emerged from the hallway, towel slung around his neck, completely unaware of the war zone he'd just walked into. His eyes darted between me and Gabby, registering the tension in the air. "What's going on?" Gabby didn't hesitate. "Why don't you tell your girlfriend, Carl? Or should I?" His expression flickered. A moment of panic. Then, the worst thing he could have done. He hesitated. I stepped forward, rage and humiliation bubbling in my chest. "Tell me. Right now." He exhaled, rubbing his face. "It's complicated." I wanted to slap him. Instead, I turned to Gabby. "I believe you." Her face softened, if only for a second. Then, with one last glare at Carl, she stormed out. I didn't follow her. I didn't need to. I was done. I left Carl that night, but the anger didn't leave me. It sat in my chest, heavy and suffocating. At first, I thought I'd feel some relief, like ripping off a bandage and letting the wound breathe. But instead, it festered. The betrayal wasn't just his. It was his entire family's silence, their complicity. They all knew. That was what hurt the most. His mother, his brothers, even Emily. They had watched me come over, let me sit with them, laugh with them, and never once said a word. Not even a warning, a hint, nothing. In the days after, Carl tried reaching out, but I ignored him. I didn't need his explanations. There was nothing he could say that would undo what had already been done. I started cutting ties completely, deleted our photos, blocked his number, removed myself from anything that connected us. But then, I remembered Emily. I had always been generous with her, not in a way that made me feel taken advantage of. At least, not before. I had paid for her makeup subscription, kept her on my streaming services, even set up a magazine subscription in her name. And then there was the prom dress. She had planned to borrow one from a friend of mine, someone who had 4 daughters and a collection of barely worn gowns. At first I hesitated. Emily wasn't Carl. She hadn't cheated on me. But then I thought about how she had just sat there, indifferent, while my world was falling apart. No shock, no concern, nothing. That's when I made my decision. I canceled everything. The makeup box, the streaming accounts, the magazines. I called my friend and told her not to lend Emily the dress. If she had been comfortable benefiting from me all this time, then she could figure it out without me. And I didn't feel guilty. At least, not yet. The more I thought about it, the more justified it felt. Emily wasn't some helpless child. She was almost 17, mature enough to know right from wrong. Mature enough to know that what her father had done was cruel. Yet she had shown no sign of sympathy, no acknowledgement of the mess I had just been thrown into. I didn't owe her anything. Canceling the makeup subscription was easy. A few clicks, and it was gone. The streaming services? Done. The magazines? Canceled. The prom dress? I called my friend, explained the situation, and we agreed. Emily didn't deserve the favor. For a while, there was silence. No calls, no messages. I wondered if Carl had even noticed. Then, one evening, my phone lit up. Carl, I let it ring. Then another text, another call. Finally, a message popped up from an unknown number, Emily. Did I do something wrong? I stared at the screen. A part of me wavered, just for a second. But then I remembered that night, the way she had just sat there, ignoring everything, like I didn't exist. Like I hadn't been in her life for almost 2 years, helping her, caring about her. I didn't respond. Carl, however, wasn't about to let it go. Within an hour, he was calling again, leaving voice messages. His tone was different this time. Less anger, more desperation. Look, I get it. You're mad at me. But Emily had nothing to do with this. She's a kid. Don't punish her for my mistakes. I almost laughed. Wasn't that exactly what he had done to me? Made me collateral damage in his lies? I typed out my response carefully before sending it. Let Gabby do it. His reply came almost instantly. You have no idea what Gabby did. I didn't care. I was done. Carl didn't take my response well. Less than an hour after I told him to let Gabby do it, my phone started blowing up again. First, more texts, then calls, then a long-winded voice message where he started off calm, but quickly turned into a frustrated rant. You don't understand what she did, he repeated, voice tense. She vandalized our website, took it down completely. It's just a black screen now. She locked me out of every account, deleted client contacts. I have nothing. I could hear the anger and desperation in his voice, but I felt nothing. Just a dull satisfaction, knowing that for once, he was the one being blindsided. When I didn't respond, he tried another approach. Emily doesn't deserve this, he said, his voice lower now, almost pleading. I get that you hate me. Fine. But don't take it out on her. She's been crying. She doesn't understand why you cut her off like this. I rolled my eyes. Now he cared about fairness? Now he wanted to talk about what someone deserved? I typed back a simple reply. She knew. A few minutes passed before he responded. She's just a teenager. She didn't have the power to stop me. I sighed. I wasn't expecting Emily to control her father, but she wasn't some naive little girl either. She had no problem accepting gifts, asking me for things, letting me help her. Yet she had also known about Gabby. And still, she said nothing. I didn't reply. Carl sent one last message. You're better than this. I stared at the words for a long moment, then locked my phone and set it down. I wasn't sure if that was true anymore. But I did know one thing. I wasn't going to be used again. For the first time in a long while, my phone stayed silent. No more messages from Carl, no more attempts to guilt trip me. It should have felt like peace, but instead, I found myself restless, replaying everything over and over in my head. I brought it up to my friends, expecting full support. Instead, I got mixed reactions. "You're absolutely right," Lisa said without hesitation. "They all stood by and let this happen. Why should you keep doing favors for a girl who clearly didn't care about you?" But then Julia, who had been quietly listening, shook her head. "She's 16. She's not responsible for what her dad did. You're punishing the wrong person." I frowned. "She isn't just a kid. She's almost 17. She's mature when it benefits her. She had no issue taking things from me. But when it came to telling me the truth?" Silence. Julia sighed. Maybe she was scared. "Scared of what?" I shot back. "Losing access to free things? Because that sure didn't stop her from taking them while knowing the truth." The argument simmered between us, neither of us backing down. Others chimed in, and soon my group of friends was completely split. Half of them agreed with me. Emily wasn't some innocent bystander, and I had no obligation to keep giving when I had been betrayed. The other half saw it differently, insisting she was just collateral damage in Carl's mess. And for the first time, I started to wonder, had I gone too far? I didn't regret cutting Carl off. That was easy. But Emily, had she really been a willing participant in this? Or had she just been a teenager stuck in the middle of something bigger than her? I still wasn't sure. But I was sure of one thing. I wasn't going back. Days passed, but the conflict in my head didn't. The more I thought about it, the more I questioned myself. Was I standing up for myself, or was I just being petty? Was this about setting boundaries, or was I trying to make Carl feel the loss in any way I could? I had always prided myself on being fair, generous even. I never gave Emily things out of obligation. I did it because I wanted to. And yet, after everything, it was as if that generosity had flipped into something else. A weapon. I replayed that night again and again. The way Carl's family had avoided my eyes. The way Emily had just sat there, unmoved, as my entire world shattered. Maybe she really had been scared. Maybe she didn't know what to say. Or maybe she had just been comfortable enough to not care. Carl had accused me of punishing the wrong person. Maybe he was right. But then, another thought surfaced. If I had done nothing, if I had kept paying for everything, kept making her life easier, what would that have made me? A fool? Someone too weak to stand up for herself? Maybe there was no right answer. I wasn't going to change my mind. I knew that much. But as I sat with all these thoughts swirling in my head, I realized something. This wasn't just about Emily. This was about me, about control, about not letting people walk all over me again. So maybe it was revenge. Maybe it was about making Carl feel the loss. But after everything he had done, I didn't feel bad about it. Not yet. In the end, I stuck to my decision. Carl and Emily were out of my life, and I had no plans to change that. I didn't unblock his number. I didn't respond to Emily's last message. I moved on, at least as much as someone can after something like this. But even now, I still think about it. About Emily. About whether or not she deserved to be caught in the crossfire. I keep coming back to the same question. Was I justified, or was I just being cruel? Because I know she wasn't the one who cheated. She wasn't the one who lied. But she also wasn't completely innocent. She had let it happen, sat by quietly while I was played for a fool. Some people say she was just a teenager, that I should have handled it differently. Others say she knew exactly what she was doing, and I had every right to cut her off. And now, I leave it to you. Am I the asshole?